What happens when we sleep? In a post made in August 10, 2010 by a username that goes by Orange Soda, he recounts the story of the Russian sleep experiment, where 5 test subjects were kept awake using a gas-based stimulant. This was done by Soviet researchers in the 1940s, or in other words, the Second World War. The Soviets needed to find ways to keep their soldiers alert and awake, given how the best time to attack in war is when your enemy is asleep and tired. These test subjects were kept awake for 15 days, during which various psychological degradation occurred, surfacing the terrifying truth about the inner nature of humanity and the horrors we fear to come out of us. Additionally, these test subjects were known to be political prisoners who were promised that if they were to survive 30 days, that they would be set free. The events that followed were anything but freedom. On day 5, the prisoners started to go silent and experience severe paranoia. On day 9, the prisoners were screaming at the top of their lungs for prolonged periods of time until their vocal cords ripped. At this point, the researchers debated whether or not they should open the chambers, to which the prisoners pleaded that they keep the gas on. What these soldiers found when they opened the chamber were the prisoners' mutilated bodies and corpses, which showed signs that they cannibalized onto one another. They saw what the human race was hiding deep beneath its consciousness. What this creepypasta shows is just how far a nation is willing to go in order to fulfill their goals. History and wars in particular have shown us the brutality and atrocities that men are willing to put onto the humankind. The Holocaust, nuclear bombs, countless massacres, and so much more are just the tip of the iceberg with regards to our crimes against humanity. All these means were deemed to be just for their end. Whether these nations have done so for the sake of money, power, or divine will remains irrelevant given the clear atrocities that were witnessed. The creepypasta contextualizes the reality of these atrocities. It presents to us the question of, what are we willing to sacrifice? Or more accurately, what is our humanity worth? These prisoners were stripped and deprived of their humanity, all for the sake of a war that caters to the interests of the minority and the elites. Ethics of science were suspended, ignored, and outright violated because we maximized the overall good. In the perspective of those scientists, soldiers, and political leaders, the deprivation of these prisoners' humanity is but a small price to pay for the sake of winning their war. Those two fields are what are being satirized in this creepypasta: incentives for war and scientific ethics. We, as the human race, tread carefully on these concepts because our humanity is dependent on it. Our ability to empathize with others is what allows us to accurately perceive others' internal personal state and to have effective responses to them. To be deprived of such is akin to losing our humanity. While the creepypasta depicts these prisoners to have been reduced to these monsters that were deprived of their humanity, the last line flips the script entirely. When these soldiers were asked, "What are you?" the prisoners replied, "Have you forgotten? We are you." Perhaps the ones who have been truly stripped of their humanity were not the prisoners themselves, but instead were the soldiers and scientists who conducted this experiment. Or perhaps the political powers that led to the illusion of a necessity of this kind of experiment. What the material warns against is twofold. The first is the danger that men of power pose to the general public. They are able to turn the tide in favor of their interests, regardless of what or who the consequences are. This looks like Russia invading Ukraine, Israel invading Palestine, or even something as specific as using AI and technology to create weapons of mass destruction. As do the scientists of the creepypasta invent a gas-based stimulant that keeps soldiers awake, so too do the weapons manufacturer of the world invent drones that aim, shoot, and kill. The incentives to create weapons that strip the surface of the world of life stem directly outward from the political will of these nation leaders. The second warning is with regards to sleep deprivation. While it does not stem directly from the socio-cultural aspect of the content, it too is a heavy and important part of what contributes to the eeriness of the material. According to the American National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, we humans need sleep in order to rest our bodies, balance our hormonal clocks, and circulate our blood thoroughly in order to excrete our bodily waste into blood and out of our bodies. Failure to do so leads to mass complication of bodily functions, most terrifying of which are paranoia, hallucinations, and lack of logical thinking. In an epistemological constructivist sense, our realities are based on our sensation and cognition, or in simple terms, what we see and what we feel. But what if those sensations were to be hijacked or become inefficient? What becomes of our realities and perception when we see things that aren't there, become fearful and skeptical of the intention of others, or when we perceive the world around us in a way that just doesn't make any sense? On an everyday basis, we make interpretations and judgments based on what we perceive. But can we really be sure of ourselves when we operate on a less than adequate amount of sleep? What makes this idea scary is the fact that it affects us every day. We lose sleep over things like school, work, or your 10th match on Bumble this month. We start to become unproductive, unable to maintain our focus on work, become easily agitated, and even become sluggish in our movements, which may seem minuscule but can become extremely dangerous, such as when driving under severe sleep deprivation. Anyone who has ever been at the expressway at 2 a.m. and start to fall asleep knows the fear of driving straight in between the lines and waking up 5 seconds later, nearly crashing into the railings. Given that sleep is important to us in the everyday, sleep deprivation is a fear and a danger that reminds us that we are simply mortal human beings. Our battle for sleep deprivation is not something that just lasts days, weeks, or months. It is a war that lasts our entire lives. In addition, the creepypasta sells this idea of scariness by showing how, at our core, we are merely animals that are capable of harming one another should our human consciousness be stripped away. We act civilized and treat each other fairly because we live comfortable lives. But what if that comfort were to be taken away from us? Would we still treat each other with dignity and respect? When our survival and mental stability is on the line, would we not turn into the prisoners of the Russian sleep experiment, who harm and cannibalize each other simply to feel something other than hopelessness and the lack of humanity? Whether this story of the Russian sleep experiment is true or not remains irrelevant. It is not the story that keeps us up at night, it is the mere fact that it suggests our very reality. Political powers can rule our very lives. Deprivation of sleep loses our grasp on reality, and our humanity is tested in every decision that we make. As future generations, we are the ones that shape the world around us and how we continue to keep our humanity intact. But it is every bit as feasible that we are the ones that lose it. The only thing we can be certain of in life is that nothing is promised, and that tomorrow may or may not come. Sleep well tonight, and as always, thanks for watching.